Ever felt like life had a different set of rules for you? Like you were playing a game, but everyone else was handed a cheat code? My sister Amber got a $1 million head start, and I was told to earn my own way. But what they didn't know was that while they were busy looking down on me, I was quietly building a fortune they couldn't even dream of. And soon enough, they'd realize just because I didn't need their help didn't mean I couldn't outshine them. My name is Jenna, and at 28, I was the one who'd always been overlooked in my family. Amber, my perfect older sister, was the golden child, the one who always had it easy. From the moment she stepped into the room, all eyes were on her. She had everything: money, success, the perfect life. Meanwhile, I was living in a cramped, rented apartment, working my ass off in real estate and getting barely by. Family dinners were the worst. Every time Amber opened her mouth about her luxury cars, her penthouses, her trips to Paris, it felt like someone was stabbing me in the chest. And when they asked, "So Jenna, how's your little real estate project going?" I could feel their pity behind their words. But what they didn't know was that I was building something bigger than they could ever imagine. What they saw as struggle, I saw as strategy. They didn't see me as a businesswoman, but I was more than just the girl who couldn't get it together. I was the one working late nights, finding the right deals, and quietly turning my dreams into reality. The apartment they mocked? It was my first acquisition. A small win, but a win nonetheless. And I was just getting started. Amber got $1 million to start her restaurant business. I got something much more valuable: silence. I didn't need their money, their support. I was building my empire with my own two hands. And trust me, when the time came, they'd all see. They thought I was just trying to figure it out. Little did they know, I wasn't figuring anything out, I was building. I was making moves they couldn't even imagine, deals they'd never hear about. I wasn't going to shout about my success from the rooftops. I was going to let it speak for itself. But first, I had to get through one more family dinner. One more night of their smug glances, their thinly veiled pity, and their whispered, "Well, Jenna, maybe one day you'll get there." Every time Amber was praised for her latest accomplishments, a part of me wanted to scream. I had worked just as hard, if not harder. But instead, I smiled and nodded, playing the part of the invisible one. I wasn't like Amber. I wasn't interested in the fame or the flashy success. What I was interested in was creating something real, something that would last long after the applause died down. I wasn't playing by their rules. I was making my own. And soon enough, I'd show them just how much I was capable of, whether they believed in me or not. The night felt like it was stretching on forever, each passing minute dragging heavier than the last. I could feel the weight of their eyes on me, even though they were pretending not to notice. Amber was in her element, spinning another story about her latest business dealer, newest restaurant chain, a game changer, she called it. She flashed a smile. And, of course, my parents and the rest of the family ate it up. I didn't let it show, but it stung. It always did. The table was covered with fancy dishes, but I couldn't focus on the food. Every word out of Amber's mouth felt like a slap in the face, especially when she mentioned her latest luxury car or how she'd just signed a deal worth millions. Meanwhile, I sat there, in my rented apartment, pretending I didn't care. But I cared more than I let on. Aunt Evelyn's voice cut through the air, sharp and fake. "So Jenna, how's that little place you're renting? Still living on Alder Street?" she asked, her smile almost too wide. "You must be tired of that by now. Don't you think it's time you upgraded?" I forced a smile, taking a slow sip of my iced tea, trying to mask my frustration. "I like my place," I said, keeping my voice steady. "It suits me just fine." But that wasn't the truth. The truth was, I didn't just like my place, I owned it. I'd bought that apartment myself, the whole building, actually. But they didn't know that. They thought I was just another struggling renter, someone they could look down on. What they didn't realize was that I wasn't struggling. I was playing the long game, and I was about to show them how. Dinner dragged on. Amber was still talking about her private jet and her second home in the Hamptons when Preston chimed in, looking over at me with that same smug expression he always had. "So, Jenna, you still doing that little real estate thing on the side?" He laughed, but there was an edge to it. I don't know how you do it, really. Must be nice to have a hobby that doesn't pay the bills. I didn't flinch. I had learned a long time ago how to play it cool. I had heard these jabs before, but this time was different. This time, they didn't know that I had been making moves behind the scenes. They didn't know that while they were flashing their wealth around, I had been quietly building something they couldn't even begin to comprehend. It wasn't just about the apartment. That was just the beginning. The truth was, I owned more than just that. A lot more. And then, just as I'd expected, it happened. Dad, finally lowering his glass, spoke up. "Speaking of business," he said, his voice tight with the kind of stress I hadn't heard from him in a long time. "I've been hearing some rumors about the new owner of Ashcraftoft Plaza." "You heard anything about that, Preston?" Preston nodded, his face growing serious. "Yeah, I've been hearing it too. No one knows who's behind it, but whoever it is, they've been buying up everything around here." I felt the tension in the room shift. Everyone was suddenly listening. "I've heard rumors too," Dad said, eyes darting from one person to the next. "They say it might be some foreign investor. Could be someone we don't even know, but they've got the board worried. They're asking questions about Ashcraftoft's finances. Creative accounting, maybe?" I took a deep breath and leaned back in my chair. This was it. This was where I stepped into the light. "I think you're right," I said, not missing a beat. "But actually, you're all wrong. I'm the new owner of Ashcraftoft Plaza, and the majority of the block on Alder Street, too." The room went completely silent. My dad's face went pale. Amber dropped her fork, and Preston's jaw practically hit the table. "You?" Amber gasped. "You own all of that?" I nodded calmly. "Yeah, and a few other properties you probably don't even know about. West Pine Holdings me firm purchased them. You know, the ones you've all been so quick to dismiss." There was no response at first, just stunned silence. And then came the inevitable, drawn-out question. Preston, in disbelief, stammered, "Butho? You? How did you?" I didn't give him the satisfaction of an answer just yet. Instead, I let the truth sink in. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need their money. What I had been quietly building was something real. Something that, in the end, would last. This moment wasn't just a victory for Mate, was a lesson for them. What they had always assumed about me, that I was the failure, the one who would never succeed on my own, was about to come crashing down. They could no longer dismiss me, no longer look at me like I was a joke. Because the reality was, I was the one holding all the cards. I wasn't just a struggling tenant. I was the one in control, and they were finally going to see that. The air was thick with disbelief. My family had gone silent too, stunned to speak. Preston's face was still frozen in shock, and Amber was staring at me like I had just pulled a rabbit out of a hat. The kind of silence that followed a bombshell is always louder than any words could be. I sat there, almost relishing the moment, watching their faces slowly change from confusion to realization. Their judgment, their mocking glances. Everything they'd thrown at me suddenly felt so small. My dad, the first to snap out of his shock, cleared his throat. "So, let me get this straight. You, Jannar, the owner of Ashcraftoft Plaza?" "Not just Ashcraftoft," I said, leaning forward a little, enjoying the shift in power. "I own several properties in Portland. Some of them you might have passed on your way here. You've all been too busy looking the other way to notice." There was a long pause, the kind where you could almost hear the gears turning in their heads. Finally, Amber broke the silence. How did you manage all of this, and why didn't you tell us?" Her voice wavered between confusion and, surprisingly, a hint of awe, but it didn't reach her eyes. I just smiled. "Because I didn't need to. I've been too busy building something real, something that wasn't handed to me." I could feel my mom's eyes on me, but I didn't look at her. I knew what she was thinking. She was trying to figure out how this had all slipped past her. How her daughter, the one she had once whispered about with concern, had quietly become more successful than she'd ever imagined. I could almost hear the words, "Why didn't you ask for help?" in her thoughts. But I didn't need help. It wasn't just about the money, though. It was about proving to the man to myself that success wasn't something you inherited. It wasn't a game of chance, and it wasn't about appearances. It was about making smart moves, taking risks, and building from the ground up. Dad leaned back in his chair, clearly trying to process what I had just said. This is unexpected, Jenna. But don't think that this means you're in the clear. You've got a lot to prove. We built this family's name from the ground up. You can't just waltz in and expect to take over. Don't worry, Dad, I said calmly. I'm not here to take over. I'm here to fix what you've all ignored for years. The Ashcraftoft brand was built on a legacy, but it was also built on nepotism and unethical practices. I'm changing that. Preston suddenly spoke up, his usual cocky attitude replaced by something far less confident. Wait, so you're telling me all those investments, the ones you've been pretending to be struggling with, they were all part of this? I leaned back in my chair, not missing the irony. Yes, every single one of them. And you know what, Preston? I did it without borrowing from the company's funds to finance my personal life. His face turned red. He shifted uncomfortably, but I could tell he was furious. But the real fun was just beginning. I turned to my mom, who had been sitting quietly, absorbing it all. Mom, I began, my voice softer but still carrying the weight of everything I had held back for years. All this time, you told me I needed to prove myself, but I didn't need anyone's approval. Not from you, not from anyone. I built this on my own, and I'm proud of it. Her expression softened slightly, though I could see the flicker of regret in her eyes. The night dragged on. The mood had shifted from shocked silence to defensive scrambling. They weren't angry, no, not yet. They were scrambling, trying to figure out how to spin this into something that wouldn't tarnish their perfect family image. Cassandra, always the one with the sharpest tongue, spoke up next. This can't be happening. You're going to tear down everything we've built. This was supposed to be our legacy. I shook my head, a smirk playing at my lips. No, Cassandra. You're the ones who tore it down. You're the ones who thought you could play the game without consequences. I'm not tearing anything down. I'm rebuilding what you destroyed. As they scrambled to maintain control, I realized something. They had no idea what real legacy meant. They thought it was all about money, appearances, and power plays. They never understood that legacy is built on integrity, on the people you serve and the communities you protect. The following morning, the media caught wind of the news. I had no doubt they'd be relentless, but it didn't matter to me. I was prepared for what came next. West Pine Holdings would be making a public statement today, and I would be taking over Ashcraftoft Plaza officially. My assistant, Isla, walked into my office, handing me a cup of coffee. The press is already buzzing. Your family's got a lot of questions to answer, I hear. I smiled, a calm resolve settling in. Good, let them answer. It's time for them to realize that legacy isn't about what you inherit, it's about what you build on your own. The days after the dinner were a blur. The media didn't waste a second, blasting the story across every outlet. Underdog daughter takes over multi-million-dollar property empire. That was the headline of the day. My phone rang nonstop with journalists wanting an interview. Some offered praises. Others were just curious about how this quiet, underestimated woman had suddenly taken charge of everything. Meanwhile, my family was in complete disarray. They were scrambling to control the damage, making calls, issuing statements. My father, always the head of our family business, refused to accept the fact that I was the new face of Ashcraftoft Plaza. Dad's voice, crackling through the phone, was colder than I had ever heard it. Jenna, this is a huge mistake. You don't know what you're doing. This was never part of the plan. I laughed softly to myself, keeping my tone steady. Oh, but Dad, it was part of the plan, just not your plan. As the media frenzy died down a little, I knew it was time to get serious. I wasn't just sitting on this empire. I had a vision, one that didn't involve the corporate mess my family had built. I called in my trusted team, including Kelsey, my head of operations, who had been with me from the very beginning. We need to fix the public image of Ashcraftoft. Make it more than just a shopping center. It's time for a complete overhaul. She raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting this. You want to transform the whole plaza? How much are you thinking? I leaned forward, my hands steady, my voice clear. We'll start by supporting the community. No more just lining our pockets. We're going to build affordable housing above the plaza. Make it a space where families can live, work, and shop. We'll invest in local businesses, and instead of focusing on the usual luxury brands, we'll give a platform to small businesses. The public will see us as more than just a corporation, they'll see us as part of the community. Of course, my family wasn't thrilled with this, especially Preston, who had always been in charge of the corporate side of things. He called me the next morning, his voice thick with anger. "You're ruining everything we built," Preston yelled. "You think that kind of project will bring in the same kind of profits? You're making a mistake, Jenna. The numbers won't add up." "I'm not here to build another empire for myself, Preston. I'm here to build something that actually matters, and I'll prove you wrong," I replied, my tone unwavering. But deep down, I knew this wouldn't be easy. I was about to shake up everything they'd spent decades building, and no one liked that kind of change. I wasted no time in making my first big strategic move. The city was in desperate need of affordable housing, and I already had several potential investors lined up. Within weeks, I was sitting at a table with some of the most influential people in Portland. This was more than just real estate. This was about changing the landscape of the city itself. "This is more than just a financial opportunity," I said, addressing the group of investors. "This is about giving back to a community that's been neglected. Imagine not just building properties, but creating homes. Homes where people can actually live and thrive. And in return, we build a legacy that will last for generations." The room was silent for a moment, then one by one, the investors began to nod in agreement. By the end of the meeting, I had secured the funding needed to start my first major project. Ashcraft Plaza would become a mixed-use space, integrating affordable living with high-end retail. Weeks passed, and the tension between me and my family grew. Mom finally came around, though I could tell she felt conflicted. She wasn't fully on board with my methods, but she could see the positive change in the city. Amber, on the other hand, refused to speak to me, still reeling from the shock of everything. But the real challenge wasn't my family. The real challenge came from the outside world. People were watching me now, waiting for me to fail. The media didn't know how to categorize me. Was I a corporate villain or a savior of the community? The answers didn't matter to me. I had one mission: to prove that success didn't have to come at the expense of others. The next few months were a blur of meetings, contracts, and unexpected alliances. I made sure to stay one step ahead, keeping my intentions clear but my moves calculated. By the time the first phase of the project was announced, the city was buzzing with excitement. Then, one evening, after a long day of meetings, I received a call. It was from Dad, who sounded different. "Jenna," he said quietly, "I've been watching you, and I've been wrong. You've proven me wrong." My heart raced. I hadn't expected this, especially not from him. We've always believed success meant power, control, and money. But you've shown me that there's another way, and maybe I was too quick to dismiss it. I paused, the weight of his words settling in. "Thanks, Dad. It's not about the money. It never was. It's about doing something that lasts." The following week, we officially broke ground on the first phase of the redevelopment project. The press covered it, and my family's name was now linked to a brand new venture that didn't just focus on profits, but on giving back. My family couldn't deny it anymore. The world was watching, and they were watching me. I wasn't just the girl who struggled. I was the one leading the way forward. The press had quieted down, and the construction crews were working around the clock. Ashcraft Plaza was starting to take shape, not just as a retail hub, but as a symbol of what I had worked so hard to build. The affordable housing projects were well underway, and small businesses had already begun to sign leases for spaces in the new development. It was everything I had hoped for, and more. But there were still whispers. "She's only doing this for the attention. It's just a publicity stunt, nothing more than a trend." It didn't bother me, at least not on the surface. I knew the truth. I wasn't doing this to be famous or for recognition. I was doing this because it was the right thing to do. But somewhere deep inside, the whispers stung. They always did. I wanted my family to see it, to realize I wasn't the failure they'd always thought I was. One afternoon, I was sitting in my office going over the latest reports on the project when I received a call from my mom. It was the first time in months we had spoken without the usual tension. "Jenna," she paused, as if searching for the right words. "I've been thinking. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe you were right all along." I leaned back in my chair, surprised by the sincerity in her voice. "What do you mean?" "I see the changes you're making. The way you're changing the community, helping people who really need it," she sighed. "I think I underestimated you. And I've been so focused on the wrong things." I could hear the regret in her voice. She wasn't just talking about the project. She was talking about me. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. "Mom, I didn't do this for you. I didn't do it for anyone except myself. I just wanted to prove that I could do something real, something that mattered." That evening, after our conversation, I received another unexpected call, this time from Amber. She was quiet at first, and I could tell she was struggling with what to say. "Jenna, I know I've been hard on you. I've always thought you were just wasting time. But the way you're turning this around, the impact you're making, I think you've finally proven me wrong." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I never expected Amber to admit she had been wrong. She was always the golden child, always the one who had it all. To hear her say this felt like a victory, but also like a challenge. She wasn't just acknowledging my success, she was acknowledging that I had surpassed her in a way she hadn't expected. "Thanks, Amber," I said softly. "But this isn't about proving you wrong. It's about proving to myself that I'm capable of more than what they thought of me." But just as things seemed to be settling, a new problem emerged. A report came across my desk about a large corporation interested in buying Ashcraftoft Plaza, a potential buyer with deep pockets. They were looking to take control of the plaza, with plans to push the affordable housing projects aside in favor of more luxury stores. They offered a substantial amount of money to the board members, and rumors swirled that they had already started making their move behind the scenes. I knew this was coming. The moment I started changing things, I became a target. People with power and money didn't like it when someone like me started shaking things up. But this wasn't just a business decision. This was personal. They weren't after just a property, they were after everything I had built. I had a choice to make: back down and let them take over, or fight for everything I had worked for. The next morning, I called an emergency meeting with my board of directors. The room was tense. I could see the nervous glances exchanged between the members. Some of them had already been in contact with the corporation's representatives. I knew some were willing to sell out. "I won't sell," I said firmly, standing up. "This is not just a business to me. This is a community. These people, this is their home, and I won't let anyone destroy what we've built." The room fell silent. I could feel the weight of the moment. "Are you sure?" Preston asked, his voice filled with doubt. "This is a huge risk. You're about to go up against a corporation that's bigger than any of us." "I've already fought bigger battles than this," I said, my voice steady. "I didn't get here by backing down. I didn't get here by letting fear dictate my decisions." I spent the next few days preparing for battle. I met with the community leaders, the small business owners who had signed leases in the new plaza, and the investors who had supported my vision from the start. I made sure they were all on board, ready to back me up if things escalated. The first step was to make sure that the board knew they were walking a fine line. If they sided with the corporation, they would lose everything I had built, not just the money, but the legacy. The final confrontation came when the corporation made its offer official. They came in with a massive check, offering more money than I could have dreamed of. But it wasn't about money anymore. It was about the principle of it all. "I'm not selling," I said to the CEO of the corporation. "I'm not selling out my community or my vision. You can offer me all the money in the world, but it won't change the fact that this plaza, this place, will never be yours." A few weeks later, the corporation withdrew their offer. The pressure had been too much for them. They realized they couldn't win it when the entire community was behind me. The plaza remained in my hands, and the affordable housing project was moving forward. But the victory didn't just feel like a win over the corporation. It felt like a win over every person who had ever doubted me, over my family, over the naysayers, and over the critics. I wasn't just the girl they had written off anymore. I was the woman who had taken control, who had built something real and who had the strength to protect it. It was finally over. The media buzz had died down, the corporation had backed off, and the construction on Ashcraft Plaza was proceeding smoothly. The new affordable housing units were rising, and the first wave of tenants were moving in. Small businesses were thriving in the space I had provided for them. The plaza was no longer just a property, it had become a community, a hub of growth and hope. I sat in my office, staring out at the city skyline, reflecting on everything I had accomplished. It was hard to believe it had all started with a single apartment in a rundown building on Alder Street. So much had changed in such a short time. I had fought for something bigger than money. I wasn't just taking over a plaza. I was taking control of my own narrative. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. I didn't need to look at the caller ID to know who it was. It was Dad. "Jenna," he said, his voice no longer cold. "I need to talk to you. Can you meet me at the office?" The words hung in the air. It had been a while since we'd spoken like this, especially without the usual tension. I could hear something different in his tone this time. Something humbled. When I arrived at his office, he was standing by the window, staring out at the city. It was the same view I had seen 1,000 times, but today, it felt different. Dad had always been the one in control, the one calling the shots. But today, it was clear that he saw things in a new light. "You were right," he said without turning around. "About everything. About the plaza. About the community. About the future." My heart skipped a beat. This was the moment I had been waiting for. Not to be acknowledged for the money or success, but for what I had built. "I've been so focused on the wrong things," Dad continued, his voice softer now. "I thought the legacy was all about power, wealth, and prestige. But it's more than that. You've shown me that success means something deeper. It's about making a difference in people's lives." I couldn't help but smile. "I never did it for you, Dad. I did it for me. And for everyone who believed they didn't have a voice." He turned to face me then, his eyes meeting mine for the first time in years without judgment. "I know, and I'm proud of you." Later that evening, we had a family dinner. It wasn't just any dinner, it was different. For the first time, I felt like we were actually talking, not just pretending. Amber, Preston, and Mom were there too. Amber was the first to speak up. "Jenna," she started, her voice almost hesitant. "I'm sorry. I didn't believe in you. I thought you'd always be the underdog. But you proved me wrong. I didn't realize how much you were working on, how much you were changing things. I'm proud of you." It was one of the hardest things for Amber to admit, and I could tell it wasn't easy. But hearing those words from her felt like a weight had been lifted. The resentment, the competition, it all seemed like a distant memory. Preston chimed in next. "Yeah, well, I guess I owe you an apology too. I thought you'd just crash and burn, but you didn't. And you didn't need our help to make it happen. You did it on your own." I could feel the shift in the room. My family, who had once seen me as the failure, were now starting to see me as the success I always knew I was. And that felt better than any amount of money or prestige ever could. The following months brought even more change. Ashcraft Plaza became a model for sustainable development. The city council asked me to speak at their annual conference, and small business owners from across the city started asking for advice on how to grow their own ventures. I didn't just want to build a business, I wanted to build a future where people mattered more than profit. The projects I had started were beginning to take root, and more families were moving into the affordable housing unit. I had created a space where people could thrive, and that was worth more than any corporate takeover or flashy success. But I wasn't done yet. This was just the beginning. One evening, I stood at the edge of Ashcraft Plaza, looking out at the skyline. It was a view I had always dreamed of, but it wasn't just the view that mattered. What mattered was what I had built, what I had fought for. I thought about everything that had happened, the family dinners, the insults, the years of being overlooked. I thought about all the times I had been told to earn my own way, and how I had used that as fuel to drive me forward. And I realized that I wasn't just fighting for success, I was fighting for something bigger. I was fighting for a legacy that wasn't about power, money, or prestige. It was about creating something real, something that would last. And it wasn't just mine anymore. Thank you for following my journey. Life isn't always easy, but as you've seen in this story, with passion, patience, and a clear vision, nothing is impossible. Remember, not everyone will believe in you from the start. But when you stay committed to your goals and overcome obstacles on your own, you'll find the inner strength to change the world. If this story has inspired you, don't forget to like and share it with those who you think need to hear it. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos about life-changing journeys, overcoming adversity, and discovering inner strength. Together, we will continue to write great stories. Thank you for your support. Remember, everyone has their own story and mission to fulfill. We just need to believe in ourselves and keep walking that path. Share this story with those who need to hear it. And together, we'll create a world filled with inspiration.